My name is Caroline Morrow, and I'm 34 years old. For 6 months, my whole family told me how lucky we were. My sister Lindsey had moved in to care for our mother after the stroke. She gave up everything for it, they said, and I believed them, and I sent thank you cards. Then one Tuesday in October, I drove down to visit Mom, and there was a sign hammered into the front lawn of the house I grew up in. For sale. Nobody had told me. Lindsey said the house was too much for Mom now, that she'd already found a buyer. And I said, okay. But that night, I started counting things the way I count things for a living, and the numbers did not add up. 2 weeks later, I found a shoebox in the hall closet. 70 checks inside. Every one of them signed in my mother's name, by a hand that was not my mother's. My parents told me to keep it quiet. She's family, they said. What I did next is the only reason I'm telling you this at all. Welcome back to Calm Drama Stories, where we sit with the quiet betrayals that happen inside families and the people who choose the truth. Anyway, if a story like this has ever touched your family, you'll feel every word of this one. Drop a comment and be sure to subscribe. Before I tell you about the checks, you need to meet my mother the way she was. Joan Morrow raised 2 daughters in a white farmhouse at the end of Pratt Road, the house her own parents built in 1961. She had inherited all of it from them, the house and the 300 acres around it. When Dad's niece finally quit, they sold the farmland to the neighbors and kept the house. And the money from that land, Mom's money from Mom's family, sat in the bank earning almost nothing. More than $700,000 of it. The quiet kind of rich that still drives a 10-year-old sedan and shells peas on the porch. She kept a vegetable garden that fed half the church. She balanced her checkbook at the kitchen table every Sunday night with a cup of decaf, and that is probably where I got it. I run a small bookkeeping practice 2.5 hours north in a town most people drive through on their way to somewhere else. I built it from that same kitchen table habit, one client at a time. Mostly farmers and a hardware store and the diner on Main. My sister Lindsey is 4 years older than me. Growing up, she was the loud one and I was the careful one. And somewhere along the line, that turned into a quiet scorekeeping neither of us ever said out loud. She always felt I was the favorite. I never felt like anyone's favorite. I just felt responsible. Mom loved that house more than she loved almost anything except us. The summer before her stroke, we sat on the porch shelling peas, and she put her hand on my knee and said something I would carry like a stone in my pocket for the rest of this story. This house stays in the family, Carol. Promise me. I laughed and told her she'd outlive us all. I promised anyway. The easy way you promise things you assume you'll never be tested on. I had no idea I was already on the clock. The stroke came in March, on a Wednesday, while she was hanging laundry. The doctors called it a moderate event. It took the strength from her right side and tangled her words so that the woman who used to win the church trivia night now had to hunt for the name of a spoon. Her mind was still in there. You could see it behind her eyes, sharp and frustrated. But her hand shook, and her speech came slow, and she could not hold a pen the way she used to. I wanted to move home. I sat in my office and did the math 3 times, the way I do everything 3 times. My practice was 8 months from breaking even. If I closed it to move down, I'd lose the thing I'd spent 6 years building, and I still couldn't be there every hour she needed. Lindsey called me before I'd finished the spreadsheet. "Don't worry about a thing," she said. "I've got Mom. You keep your business alive." I cried with relief. I want you to hear that clearly because later people would say I should have known. I didn't know. I was grateful. My sister, who had drifted and struggled and never quite landed anywhere, had finally found a place to be needed, and she was choosing our mother. So I said, "Thank you." I drove down every other weekend and brought groceries and sat with Mom and drove back north feeling like the lucky one. That gratitude was the door, and I'm the one who held it open. In April, Lindsey raised the money. She did it gently over Sunday dinner with Mom dozing in the next room. "Somebody has to pay her bills," she said. "The pharmacy, the property tax, the heating oil. I'm here. It should be me." It made sense. It made so much sense that I helped. We sat at the same kitchen table where Mom balanced her checkbook, and a notary came out and Mom signed a durable power of attorney, making Lindsey her financial agent. The bank added Lindsey to Mom's checking account as a joint owner, so she could write checks without driving to the branch every time. Dad nodded along. I read the POA. I'll give myself that much. But I read it the way you read a lease for an apartment you've already decided to rent. I was looking for nothing, so I found nothing. There's a line in those documents about the agent's duty to keep records and account for everything. I remember thinking how thorough that was. I even said out loud, "Good, that protects Mom." Lindsey smiled and said, "Of course it does." I signed the family consent form at the bottom without slowing down, because slowing down would have meant I didn't trust my own sister. And what kind of person doesn't trust her own sister with their dying by inches mother? I drove north that night with the radio on, lighter than I'd felt in weeks. I had just handed my sister the keys to everything our mother owned, and I had thanked her for taking them. It would be 5 months before I understood what those keys unlocked. The first thing that snagged was small, the way the first loose thread always is. We video called on Sunday evenings, Mom propped on the couch with her good hand wrapped around the phone. In June, I asked her a plain question. "Mom, are the bills getting paid okay?" She opened her mouth, and something crossed her face, a flicker of worry. And before she could shape a word, Lindsey leaned into the frame. "Everything's handled, Carol. Stop hovering." I laughed it off, but Mom kept looking at me. And when Lindsey stepped away to the kitchen for a second, my mother said the second thing I'd carry like a stone. "I don't see the bank papers anymore." Her voice was low and careful. "The way you talk when you're not sure you're allowed to." "What papers, Mom?" I asked. "The statements," she said. "They used to come, now they don't." Then Lindsey was back with a mug of tea, and Mom's face closed like a hand, and the conversation slid sideways into the weather and the church bake sale. I hung up and sat in my dark office and told myself a story about mail going paperless, about online statements, about a tired daughter who didn't want her younger sister second-guessing her. It was a reasonable story. I'm a reasonable person. But reasonable people miss things. And the thing I almost missed was that my mother had just asked me for help in the only word she had left, and I'd handed her the weather report. That night I wrote one sentence in the back of my work notebook. Ask about the statements. I underlined it twice. I did more than underline it. I'm not going to let anyone tell this story as though I sat on my hands. The Monday after that call, I phoned the bank. I asked for copies of Mom's checking statements, the last 6 months. The woman on the line was kind and absolutely immovable. "Are you an owner on the account, ma'am?" "No." "Are you the named agent under power of attorney?" "No, that was my sister." "Then I'm sorry, I can't release account information to you." I asked if I could at least flag the account, put a hold on it, ask someone to look. She explained patiently that a joint owner has every right to move money in that account, and that an agent under a valid PA has authority to act, and that a concerned sister with no legal standing has, in the eyes of the bank, the same authority as a stranger. None. I hung up and stared at the wall for a long time. I want you to understand the trap here, because it's the trap a lot of families walk into. The very documents we signed to protect Mom were the documents that locked me out of protecting her. I had recognized something was wrong. I had picked up the phone, and the system working exactly as designed told me to mind my own business. So I told myself the thing that lets the trap close. Maybe I was being the difficult sister. Maybe I wanted to be needed too. I would come to hate that sentence. But that summer I believed it, and I let another 6 weeks go by. And in those 6 weeks, the bleeding never stopped. By July, Lindsey's husband had moved in too. Travis Carter is the kind of man who shakes your hand a beat too long and calls you kiddo, even though you're a grown woman with a tax license. He'd run a contracting crew for years, framing houses and pouring foundations, and the work had dried up. And the way Lindsey told it, they'd lost the business and most of what came with it. I felt for them, honestly. So when I drove down that month and saw the truck in Mom's driveway, I almost didn't ask. It was new. Not new to them. New off the lot. A chrome-grilled diesel with temporary tags still in the back window, parked where Mom's old sedan used to sit. "Nice truck," I said to Travis on the porch. He grinned and slapped the hood. "Did some side work. You wouldn't believe what guys will pay for a good slab." I nodded like I believed him. Inside, Mom was thinner. The garden out back had gone to weeds. There were dishes in the sink and a smell in the house that wasn't my mother's house. And Lindsey moved through it all with a brittle performing energy, narrating her own sainthood. "I'm up 4 times a night with her," she told me. "You have no idea." I didn't doubt it. Caring for a stroke patient is brutal, thankless work. And I told her so, and I meant it. But on the drive north, I kept seeing that truck. A man with no work, parked in my mother's driveway. In a $40,000 machine he bought with side jobs nobody could name. I didn't have a theory yet. I just had a question I couldn't put down. Where was the money coming from? The text came in early October to the family group chat, the one with Mom's old number still in it that nobody had the heart to remove. Lindsey wrote it like a thought she was just now having. "Been thinking this big old house is really too much for Mom. The stairs, the upkeep. Might be time to look at options." Dad replied within a minute with a thumbs up and a heart. I stared at my phone in the parking lot of the diner, my lunch going cold in a foam box. Options. I typed 3 different responses and deleted all of them. Finally, I just wrote, "Let's talk about it as a family." Nobody answered. I called Lindsey that night and got voicemail, and again the next morning, voicemail, and a 1-word text back at noon. Busy. Something in me went very still and very alert. The feeling I get when a client's books are clean on the surface and rotten underneath. When the totals tie out, but the story doesn't. So, 2 weeks later, on that Tuesday in October, I didn't call ahead. I drove the 2.5 hours down to Pratt Road to talk to my mother face to face in her own kitchen without my sister narrating. I came around the last bend with the maples going gold, and the white farmhouse came into view exactly the way it had 10,000 times in my life. And there, planted in the front lawn between the lilac bush my grandfather put in and the porch steps I learned to walk on, was a real estate sign for sale, a buyer's name already on a writer underneath. I parked in the driveway and turned off the engine, and sat there, and I did not cry. I started counting. I found Lindsey in the kitchen drying a plate, and I kept my voice flat. "There's a sign in the yard." She didn't turn around. "I was going to call you." "It's listed, Lindsey. There's a buyer's name on it." She set the plate down and faced me, and her face had a calm I didn't recognize. The calm of someone who is rehearsed. "Assisted living is cheaper than keeping this place up," she said. "I found a buyer who will close fast and pay cash. It's the responsible thing." Down the hall, I could see Mom in her chair by the window, head turned toward us, listening. I lowered my voice. "Does Mom want to sell?" Something flickered. "Mom can't manage a decision like that anymore," Lindsey said. "That's literally why I have power of attorney." I felt the floor of the conversation drop away. "She's not gone, Lindsey. She's right there. She can hear you." "She can hear," Lindsey said. "She can't decide. There's a difference. And you'd know it if you were here instead of 2 hours away playing accountant." That landed where she meant it to. I walked down the hall and crouched by Mom's chair and took her good hand. "Mom, do you want to sell the house?" Her eyes filled. Her mouth worked, and what came out slow and ruined and absolutely clear was one word: "No." Behind me, Lindsey said brightly, "She gets confused. Carol, don't upset her." But I had heard it. I would build everything on that one word. And the strange part, the part I didn't understand yet, was that my sister hadn't actually denied anything. She just explained very reasonably why my mother's no didn't count. I went to my father next because I still believed in some clean version of the world where a father is the floor you stand on. I found Dad in the garage, sorting screws into a coffee can, the way he's done since I was a kid. A way of being busy that doesn't require talking. "Dad, they've listed the house." "I know." He didn't look up. "Did you agree to that?" "Your sister handles all that now. She put Mom's house on the market." "Mom told me she doesn't want to sell." He set down the can. "He's 73. He looked older than that in the bare garage light. His hands spotted, his shoulders gone round." "Caroline," he said, "your sister gave up her whole life to come here. She wipes your mother. She gets up in the night. You send cards." The word cards hung there. "So let her handle it. Don't come down here once a month and start trouble." I have replayed that moment 100 times. The thing that hurt wasn't the unfairness. It was watching my father, a careful and decent man, choose the easier child because the harder truth was unservable to him. He couldn't look at me while he said it. That's the part I hold on to. He couldn't meet my eyes because some part of him already knew, and knowing was a country he refused to live in. "Everything's fine," he said to the wall. "Let it be." I drove north that night, 4 hours in the dark, counting headlights, and somewhere around the state line, I stopped being the difficult sister in my own head. I became something quieter and harder. I became a bookkeeper who'd been told the totals were fine and didn't believe it. I came back that Sunday, and I came back smart. I brought a casserole and a smile, and I praised Lindsey's caregiving until she relaxed, and I waited for the 20 minutes she always took for a shower in the late afternoon. The only 20 minutes she ever let herself off duty. The second the water ran upstairs, I went to Mom. I sat on the ottoman and held both her hands and spoke low. "Mom, I need you to tell me about money, about the checks." Her face crumpled. She glanced at the stairs. The water was running. "I sign things," she whispered. "Carol, I sign things." "What things?" "I don't know." Her voice broke on it. She'd put a paper in front of me. My hand was so bad. She said, Just let me help." And I'd let her hold the pen. I don't remember what they were. Her good hand tightened on mine with surprising strength. "The money. I think it's gone. I'm scared to ask." I have heard a lot of things in my life that hurt. Nothing has ever hurt like my 71-year-old mother whispering that she was scared to ask about her own money in her own house. Upstairs, the water shut off. Mom's hand let go of mine fast. A reflex, the way an abused thing flinches at a footstep, and she folded her hands in her lap and went smooth and blank. By the time Lindsey came down with wet hair, asking if anyone wanted coffee, my mother and I were discussing the church bake sale. But I had it now. Not proof, a direction. My mother had let someone hold the pen, and I needed to find out what that pen had written. Here's the thing my sister didn't count on. She had power of attorney. She thought that made her untouchable. But a POA isn't a crown. It's a job. And the job comes with duties most people never read. An agent has a fiduciary duty to keep records, and an interested family member can ask for an accounting. I called the estate attorney I keep books for and had him walk me through how it worked in Mom's state. The exact wording, where to send it, what it could and couldn't compel. I didn't need the bank's permission for that. I needed his advice and a stamp. So I went home and drafted a letter, plain and professional, the kind I sent to clients who've fallen behind on their records. I requested a complete accounting of all transactions conducted on Joan Morrow's behalf since the power of attorney took effect. Bank statements, checks, receipts, the works. I sent it certified mail, return receipt requested to Lindsey at Mom's address, and I kept a copy in a folder I labeled with no irony at all. Mom. The green return card came back 4 days later with my sister's signature on it. That same loopy, confident signature. And I sat looking at it and thought, you signed for this at least. The reply came that night, not by mail but by text, and it was the first time the mask slipped. Why are you making this weird? I'm killing myself taking care of her, and you're sending me certified letters like I'm some deadbeat client. What is wrong with you? I read it twice. Then I did the thing that I think made all the difference. I didn't text back angry. I texted back nothing, because a guilty person needs you to respond. Silence makes them fill the air, and people who fill the air make mistakes. I put the phone face down and started a new spreadsheet. The accounting never came. What came instead was a parade of reasons. The records were at the accountant's. The accountant was on vacation. She'd been too busy with Mom's pneumonia scare, which I later learned never happened. Travis got involved, calling me himself. All warmth and reason. Kiddo, you gotta let your sister breathe. She'll get you whatever you want. She's just swamped. Every excuse bought them time, and I understood the way you understand a fact without yet feeling it. That time was the thing they actually needed. Somewhere a closing date was creeping closer, and once that house sold and the money scattered, no letter on earth would put it back. So, I made a decision that surprised everyone, including me. I told Lindsey I wanted to help. I said I'd been selfish, staying north, leaving it all on her, and I wanted to come down for a couple of weeks and pull my weight before the move. I laid it on thick. She bought it because it fed the story she told herself. The story where she was the martyr, and I was the guilty one, finally coming to my senses. About time, she said. I arranged coverage for my clients and packed a bag and drove down to sleep under my mother's roof for the first time in 20 years. That first night, hunting through the hall closet for an extra blanket, my mother cold in her chair and Lindsey already asleep, my hand pushed past the spare quilts to the back of the shelf and touched the corner of a cardboard box. A shoebox heavier than a shoebox should be. I pulled it down into the lamplight, and I lifted the lid, and the floor of my life tilted. Checks. Canceled checks. The real ones, the paper kind. My mother's small-town bank still mailed back, stamped and processed. Lindsey must have intercepted the statements and kept the canceled checks, instead of shredding them, because some part of her was a hoarder, or because she thought no one would ever look in a shoebox behind the quilts. I sat down on the hallway floor, with the lamp pulled low, and I did the only thing I know how to do under pressure. I counted. I sorted them by date, and I counted them, and my accountant's brain did the thing it does, running the tape, even while the rest of me was somewhere far away. 70 checks. I counted them 3 times. 70. Many of them written to cash, others to Travis Carter. A few to a contracting LLC I'd never heard of. The amounts climbed as the months went on, the way these things always climb. 2,000, becoming 5, becoming 12. A check for $18,000 in August, with the word renovations in the memo line, of a house that had a weedy garden and dishes in the sink. I ran the total in my head, and then I didn't believe my head, so I lined them end to end on the floorboards and added them on paper, and the number I wrote down was $725,000. 3 of a million, my mother's whole life. And then I looked at the signatures, and that's when my hands finally started to shake. Because I know my mother's handwriting. I learned cursive watching her signature, since the stroke is a struggling, broken thing. Half the letters lost. The Joan Morrow on these 70 checks was smooth, confident, even written by a steady hand that had never had a stroke in its life. I didn't scream. I didn't wake anyone. I knelt on that cold hallway floor at 2 a.m, and I photographed every single check, front and back, the way you'd document a crime scene, because that's exactly what I was kneeling in. I put the box back exactly as I'd found it, corner to corner, quilt folded the same way. Then I lay in my childhood bed and did not sleep. And instead of rage, which is loud and useless, I felt something cold and clarifying settle over me, like the first hard frost that tells the garden the season's over. I thought about what would happen if I walked into the kitchen tomorrow and threw the box on the table. Lindsey would cry, Travis would shout, Dad would beg for peace, and somewhere in the chaos, that box would disappear, and the closing would go through, and the money would finish vanishing into truck payments and debt. And in a year, my mother would be in a county facility, and my sister would be telling everyone how I'd torn the family apart over a misunderstanding. Confrontation was what they were ready for. Confrontation, they could survive. So, I wasn't going to give them one. I lay there and I thought about my work, about the difference between an argument and an audit. An argument is two people's feelings in a room. An audit is numbers and dates and signatures and a chain of custody, and it does not care who cries. I needed to stop being the sister in the room and start being the record. I needed someone who only listened to numbers, who could take 70 photographs and a broken old woman's no and turn them into something a court could hold. Around 4 a.m, I made a list, the way I always do when I'm scared, because a list is a fence you build around a panic. At the top, I wrote one line: find someone who proves things for a living. Then, finally, with the list made, I slept. I know some of you are listening to this because you felt it too, that pull to keep the peace when something is deeply, deeply wrong. Before I tell you who I called, do one thing for the people you love. This week, find out who has access to your parents' accounts and ask to see one statement, just one. Then come right back because everything turns here. Subscribe so you don't miss it. I didn't call the police. Not yet. I'd represented enough small businesses through enough disputes to know that walking into a station with a shoebox and a story gets you a report number and a long wait. And meanwhile, the house sells. What I needed first was proof so clean that no one could call it a family squabble. So I called a forensic accountant. Her name was Rachel Howren, a certified fraud examiner 2 counties over. And I found her the way I find everything, by asking the most boring, reliable people I know. In this case, an estate attorney I'd done books for. I drove to a coffee shop a town away on my errand day and laid the photographs out on the table in date order. Rachel looked at them for a long time without saying anything, just turning them, making small notes. She had reading glasses and a quiet, unhurried way about her, the way of someone who has seen money disappear before and is no longer surprised by anyone. "How much do you think is gone?" she finally asked. "Around $725,000, I said. "Over 6 months," she nodded slowly, like the number fit a shape she already knew. And your sister holds the POA and is a joint owner on the account? Yes. Don't confront her. Rachel said, Don't confront any of them. That's the mistake everybody makes, and it's the mistake the guilty party is counting on. Let them feel safe. Keep being the helpful sister. Bring me the paper, all of it, and let me build the picture. When this comes apart, you want it to come apart in a way that can't be argued with in front of the right people at the right time. I asked when that would be. She almost smiled when they're all in one room. So I became the best helpful sister you ever saw. I cooked, I did Mom's laundry, I praised Lindsey to Dad, I let Travis call me kiddo, and I laughed at his jokes. And the whole time I was quietly gathering paper the way a squirrel gathers in October. I found the original signature card from the bank in Mom's old files, the one she signed years ago and again right after the stroke, so Rachel would have a true sample of that broken, struggling hand to compare against. I found the durable power of attorney and read it properly this time, every line. Whoever drew it up years ago had kept the powers narrow. It didn't include the optional clause that lets an agent make gifts to herself. The box nobody had checked, and it carved the house out by name. A line requiring Mom's own signature for any sale of the homestead on Pratt Road. Lindsey had been operating well outside the paper she was hiding behind. I photographed Mom's prescription log to establish she was lucid, oriented, capable of saying no. I sent it all to Rachel in batches, encrypted from my car. And the closer I got, the more relaxed Lindsey became. Because nothing makes a thief comfortable like a sibling doing dishes. One night, I was wiping the counter, and Travis was on the back porch on his phone, voice low, and the window was cracked. And I heard him say a sentence I will hear for the rest of my life. Just get it closed before her sister stirs the pot. Once the money clears, what's she going to do, Sue family? I kept wiping the counter in slow circles. I didn't react, but I had it now. In his own voice, the whole thing laid bare. They knew exactly what they'd done. The only question left was a date. And 2 days later, Travis answered that question for me too. Rachel called me on a Thursday and asked me to come to her office, and I knew from her voice that she'd found the shape of it. She had the checks on one screen and the signature card on another, blown up huge. Look, she said and pointed. My mother's real signature, post-stroke, a tremoring climb of a thing, the J collapsing, the loops gone. Then the checks, 70 of them, smooth and even and certain. That's not the same hand on a good day versus a bad day. Rachel said tremor doesn't disappear because the check is large. This is a steady writer, imitating a struggling one. And she got lazy because she stopped trying to fake the tremor at all. Then she walked me through the money. First, Lindsey had funneled Mom's savings, the land money, into the joint checking account in chunks. Then the forged checks pulled it back out in clean, round numbers to cash to Travis Carter's personal account and to that contracting LLC, which turned out to be a shell with no jobs, no employees, no clients, but itself. From there, it paid down a mountain of business debt, bought the truck, bought a boat I hadn't even known about, and wired $40,000 to a marina in Florida. The house listing was the last move. Sell the homestead, scatter the proceeds, and the trail goes cold under a pile of, we sold Mom's house to pay for her care. Caroline, Rachel said, taking off her glasses. I've done this 20 years. This isn't sloppy bookkeeping by an overwhelmed caregiver. This is a pattern. It's deliberate. It's sustained. And it accelerates. People who do this don't stop. They stop when they're stopped. I asked her what stopping it looked like. She said it looked like a lot of people in a room and a knock on a door. I owed my parents a chance. That's what I told myself, and I half meant it. The truth is, I needed to know which side my father would actually stand on when the truth was on the kitchen table instead of out in the garage where he could pretend not to hear it. So, one evening with Lindsey at a doctor's appointment with Mom, I sat my father down and put a folder in front of him. Photocopies, not the originals. I'd learned that much. I laid out the checks, the signatures, the shell company, the money trail. I kept my voice level, the voice I use to tell a client their bookkeeper has been skimming. Gentle and factual and merciless. My father went gray. He picked up a check, the $18,000 one, renovations, and his hand shook almost as badly as Mom's. For a moment, I thought he'd break the right way. For a moment, I saw it land, the full weight of it, that his daughter had robbed his wife. Then I watched him do the thing I will never fully forgive and have almost learned to understand. He set the check down. He squared the stack like he could make it smaller, neater, gone. And he said quietly, "Don't make this a police thing, Caroline. She's family." I didn't move. "Mom is family too," I said. "Think of what this does to all of us." He said, "Think of your sister's life. Think of the name on this town. We handle this inside the family. Inside the family where the locks are, where I'd been locked out for 6 months." I gathered up my folder, every page, and I said the truest thing I had. "Dad, I already tried inside the family. Inside the family is where she stole it." That night, I couldn't sleep again, and I went down for water around 1, and I found my father at the kitchen table in the dark. He hadn't turned the light on. He was holding their wedding photo, the small framed one Mom keeps on the sideboard, the two of them impossibly young, in front of this same house in 1972. He didn't hear me. I stood in the doorway and watched my father grieve, and I understood him completely for one terrible minute. He is losing his wife an inch at a time to a clot in her brain. He cannot also lose a daughter to a prison sentence and a town's whispering to save the family in his head. He has decided that one daughter's crime is cheaper than the family's shame, and he has done the arithmetic the only way his heart will let him. It is a coward's math. It is also a frightened old man's math, and the two are not as far apart as I wanted them to be. I almost went to him. I almost said, "We'll find a way. We'll keep it quiet. I'll let it go." The words were right there. Then he looked up and saw me, and his face hardened back into the garage version of himself, the version that sorts screws to avoid his own daughters. And he said, "Let it go, Caroline. For your mother's sake, let it go." And I knew he wasn't asking me to protect Mom. He was asking me to help him not look at it. He had chosen in the daylight and again in the dark, and his choice was the cover-up. I said, "Good night, Dad." And I went upstairs, and I texted Rachel one word so I wouldn't lose my nerve proceeding. Dad warned her. Of course, blood protects blood, even when blood is the one bleeding you. The next morning, Lindsey came at me before I'd finished my coffee, and the martyr was gone, replaced by something with its teeth out. "Dad told me what you're doing," she said. "Photocopies sneaking around, you self-righteous little..." She stopped, recalibrated, went for the wound instead. "You abandoned her. You 2.5 hours away with your little business and your weekend visits and your thank you cards, while I cleaned up after her every single morning." Her voice cracked. "And the awful thing is, some of it was real. You don't get to drive down here and judge me. You have no idea what it cost to do this." "What does it cost?" I asked quietly. $725,000. Her face went white, then red. And then she said the thing that told me there would be no version of this where she was sorry. The thing I think she actually believed in whatever room she keeps her conscience in. I earned that money. She said it slow, like I was stupid. I'm the one who cleaned her up every morning. I'm the one who's here. That money was coming to us anyway when she's gone. I just took my wages early. I looked at my sister who had cared for our mother with her hands and robbed her with the same hands. And I understood that she had built herself a story where she was owed, and inside that story, she could sleep just fine. There was nothing left to say to her, so I said the only thing that mattered. Mom's not gone, Lindsey. She laughed ugly. Drop this, or you're not welcome in this house. It wasn't her house. That was rather the point. They moved fast after that, the way cornered things move. That afternoon, Travis got off the phone wearing a smile that didn't fit the situation, and announced to the room that the buyers wanted to close early this Friday. He said, "Cash deal. They're motivated. The title company will do it right here at the house. Easier on Mom than dragging her to an office." He looked at me when he said it, a little dare in his eyes. I understood the play immediately. Friday was 3 days away. Close Friday, the proceeds hit the account they controlled, and by the time anyone untangled a shoebox of checks, the house money would be gone too, chasing the rest of it down to that marina in Florida. They weren't speeding up because of the buyers. They were speeding up because of me, trying to get the deal across the line before the pot I was stirring boiled over. And here's where the trap they'd built almost closed on them instead, because they had made one assumption. They assumed I'd fight them here now, loud, today. They assumed I'd grab Mom and call a lawyer and start a slow, ugly war they could outrun. They had no idea I'd stopped fighting weeks ago and started documenting. I excused myself, said I had to take a work call, walked out to my car in the cold afternoon, and texted Rachel a single word the way she'd told me to when the date landed Friday. She texted back within a minute. Then Friday it is. Be in the room. Stay calm no matter what. Let me knock. I sat in my car in my mother's driveway under the for rail sign and felt the cold frost feeling settle over me one more time. 3 days. Those 3 days, Rachel and her people did the unglamorous work that actually wins. She brought in the estate attorney who'd recommended her, a soft-spoken man named Gerald Pewitt, who'd spent 30 years cleaning up after agents who thought a power of attorney was a license to steal. Together, they built the file. The forensic report laid the checks against the signature card and called the forgery what it was. They drafted a report to Adult Protective Services, documenting the financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult. My mother, with her lucidity, established by her own doctor. They prepared a fraud affidavit for the bank, whose fraud unit, it turned out, is very interested when 70 forged checks come with a forensic examiner's name attached. And to stop Friday, Gerald did the one thing that could freeze a house mid-sale. He prepared an emergency petition and a lease pendants, a legal notice filed against the property that tells the whole world a dispute is pending. A notice that makes a title company set down its pen and back away from a closing table fast. He timed the filing for Friday morning. "You don't want to file it early," he told me on the phone. "File it early, and they'll just postpone and regroup and move the money some other way. You want everyone assembled. You want the title agent there, the buyers there, your sister there, your father there. You want it to land while they're all watching, because the weight of a thing like this isn't legal. It's witnessed." I thought about Rachel saying the same thing in different words over coffee when they're all in one room. I had spent my whole life being told I made things weird by asking for the records. On Friday, the records were going to walk in and ask for them back. The night before, I sat with my mother. Lindsey and Travis had gone out to celebrate the closing they thought was coming, and Dad had gone to bed early to avoid all of us. And the house was finally just Mom and me, the way it used to be. I made decaf, 2 cups, hers in the mug with the faded bluebird she's had since I was small. We didn't talk about Friday. I didn't tell her what was coming, because I couldn't risk her face giving it away. And because some kindnesses are quieter than honesty. We watched her game shows. I held her good hand, and during a commercial she turned to me, and her ruined, careful voice found the words slow but whole. The words from a porch 2 summers ago, the stone I'd carried the whole way. "This house," she said, "stays in the family you promised." Her eyes were wet and frightened and trusting all at once. Trusting me, the daughter who'd sent cards. I had spent weeks afraid of that promise, afraid I'd have to break it, afraid that protecting her meant losing the house anyway in some court fight. But sitting there in the lamplight, I finally understood what I'd actually promised on that porch. And it wasn't about a building. I lifted her hand and pressed it to my cheek. "I'm keeping a different promise, Mom," I said. "I'm keeping you safe. The rest of it I'll handle." She studied my face for a long moment, the way she used to check my work at this very table, looking for the error. She didn't find one. She nodded and went back to her game show. And I sat there in the dark, my mother's hand in mine, the only person in that house who knew that tomorrow someone was going to knock. Friday came bright and cold. By 10, the house was full of people, and I sat in the corner of my mother's living room with a leather binder closed on my lap, and my heart doing something complicated, and my face doing nothing at all. The title agent had set up at the dining table, a tidy woman with a folder of documents and a notary stamp, and absolutely no idea what she'd walked into. The buyers were a middle-aged couple, pleasant, clutching a folder of their own, asking about the furnace. Travis stood by the window with his thumbs in his belt, lord of a manor he had emptied. Lindsey moved through the room in her best sweater, pouring coffee from Mom's good carf, playing hostess at the sale of her mother's house, radiant with how close she was to done. And Mom sat in her wheelchair by the cold fireplace where they'd parked her like a piece of the furniture being sold, hands folded, eyes moving from face to face, taking it all in. Dad sat near her, gray, silent, unable to look at any of it. The title agent cleared her throat and spread the papers and uncapped a pen. "Well," she said pleasantly, "if everyone's ready, we just need a few signatures and we'll get you folks your new home." Lindsey sat down the corf and reached for the pen with that smooth, steady, practiced hand. And I looked at the clock on the mantel, the one Mom wound every Sunday her whole life, and it read 3 minutes 10. And I knew that 2 counties over, illegal notice had just been filed against this house, and that somewhere out on Pratt Road, a car had just turned in. I stood up. "Before anyone signs," I said, "there's someone coming who should be here for this." Every head turned. Lindsey's smile went tight at the corners. "Carol," she said in the warning voice you'd use on a child in public, "we talked about this. Don't." "I'm not doing anything," I said. "I'm just asking everyone to wait a minute." The title agent's pen hovered. The buyers exchanged a glance, the first crack of doubt crossing the pleasant husband's face. Travis pushed off the windowsill. "There's nothing to wait for. Sign the papers." 5 minutes, I said, and I kept my voice so level, so reasonable that it made the room more nervous than shouting would have. That's the thing nobody teaches you about staying calm. A calm person in a tense room is the most frightening thing in it, because everyone can feel that the calm one knows something they don't. Lindsey sat down the pen, and I watched her start. Finally, to do the math, watch the first cold question move behind her eyes. Who would I have called? She'd accounted for everyone. She'd handled Dad, handled Mom, handled the buyers, handled me. Or thought she had. There was no one left who could matter. "Nobody's coming, Caroline," she said, but the certainty had thinned out of it. "You don't have anybody. You're 2 hours away. You send cards." She said it like a spell, like if she repeated my smallness enough times, it would stay true. And it was almost funny in the cold, clear way things are funny when you've stopped being afraid, because she just told me again what she'd told me for 6 months. That I didn't count. That my no didn't matter any more than Mom's had. I opened my mouth to answer her. I didn't have to, because right then into the held breath of that crowded room came 3 slow, deliberate knocks on my mother's front door. I crossed the room and opened the door. Rachel Howren stood on the porch in a charcoal coat with a thick file folder under her arm, calm as a Sunday. Behind her stood 2 more people, a woman with a county lanyard and a kind, tired face, who introduced herself quietly as an investigator from Adult Protective Services, and a man in a sport coat with a badge clipped to his belt. A detective from the county sheriff's office, who took off his hat the way you do entering a house with an elder in it. "Good morning," Rachel said to the room, not to me. "I'm a forensic accountant. I'm here regarding the finances of Joan Morrow." She walked in like she'd been invited because in the only way that counted, she had the change in the room, was a physical thing. A pressure dropped before a storm. The title agent's hand went flat on her documents. The buyer stood up, and my sister, holding Mom's good carve, pouring herself a fresh cup at the worst possible moment, simply lost her grip. The mug hit the hardwood and shattered, and coffee bloomed across the closing papers across the table, a brown stain spreading over the deed to my mother's house. Nobody moved to clean it up. "What is this?" Travis said, too loud. "This is private. You can't just—" "Sir," the detective said, mild, "nobody's under arrest. We're here to talk, but this closing isn't happening today." He turned to the title agent. "Ma'am, there's a notice been filed on this property this morning. You'll want to check before you notarize anything." She was already on her phone, already going pale, already gathering her papers out of the coffee. Rachel set her folder on the dry end of the table and opened it unhurried. And the photographs were there. The 70 checks, the signature comparison blown up huge, so the whole room could see the smooth, confident Joan Morrow beside my mother's broken, tremoring real one. Lindsey was staring at the file. "Those are private. Where did you—" "You signed for the records request." I said it was the first time I'd spoken since the knock. My voice didn't shake. Travis started shouting about lawyers, and Dad rose from his chair with his hands out, pleading to the detective, to Rachel, to God. "Please, she's family. She's my daughter. Don't do this in front of—" And I stepped to the middle of the room, and I picked up the open file, and I held it out so my father could see his wife's stolen name on every page. And into all that noise, I said the only 3 words I'd come to say. "So is Mom." The room went quiet around those 3 words. My father stood there with his hands still half raised, and I watched him look, really look, from the photographs in my hand, to Lindsey frozen by the broken mug, to Joan in her wheelchair by the cold hearth. And my mother was crying, silent, her good hand pressed to her mouth. And she was looking at him, and he was looking back at her. And 40 years passed between them in about 3 seconds. He lowered his hands. He didn't apologize. He didn't say a word to me, or to Lindsey, or to the detective. He just turned slow and crossed the room and stood beside my mother's chair and put his old spotted hand on her shoulder. That was all he chose. Not with a speech, not with sorry, just with where he let his feet carry him in the one moment it counted. For now, standing next to Mom, that was enough. The closing died on that table, The buyers gathered their folder and left without a word about the furnace. The title agent packed her stamp away like it had burned her. The APS investigator sat down beside Mom and spoke to her gently, woman to woman, asking her own questions and writing down her own answers, treating my mother like a person whose no was the only one in the room that had ever mattered. The detective took Travis and Lindsey out to the porch, one at a time, to talk. Lindsey went without the scarf, without the sweater armor, smaller than I'd ever seen her. She didn't look at me as she passed. The coffee was still spreading slowly across the deed nobody would ever sign. I knelt down and finally wiped it up. I'll tell you how it landed, because you've earned the ending. Rachel's report and the bank's fraud unit confirmed the forgeries. The matter went to the prosecutor, and that part is no longer mine to narrate or to wish for. It belongs to a courtroom and people whose job it is. What I can tell you is that the house came off the market that week. The bank could claw back only the most recent checks. A thin slice of it because most of the money was long gone, spent into debt and a truck and a boat and a wire to Florida. The rest became a fraud claim, and in time, an order for restitution that will follow my sister dollar by slow dollar for a long, long time. We put the homestead into a small trust built to do one thing: protect Joan Morrow and the roof over her, with 2 signatures required for anything, and a professional looking over both. Travis's truck and boat and the money in Florida are someone else's problem now. And the durable power of attorney that started all of it was revoked the same week by the only person who'd ever had the right to revoke it: my mother. I moved my practice. I kept the clients I could carry remotely, and I let go of the rest. And I rented a little office on Main Street, 10 minutes from Pratt Road. And now I balanced my mother's checkbook with her at the kitchen table on Sunday nights, the Bluebird mug between us. Her good hand learning to sign her ruined, beautiful, real signature again. Slow and proud. Lindsey and I don't speak. Maybe someday. Dad and I are careful with each other. 2 people repairing a bridge while standing on it. It's not the family we were. It's a truer one. Last Sunday, Mom finished the column, checked my math the way she always did, and found it clean. Then she looked up and said my name, whole and certain, the way she used to. Carol. Just that. It was everything. If there's one thing I'd want you to take from my mother's kitchen table, it's this. Loving your family doesn't mean staying silent while one of them is robbed. And sometimes the most loyal thing you can do is refuse to call a crime a family matter. That's my story. 6 months of help, 70 checks, and 1 phone call. I almost talked myself out of making. If this reminded you to find out who can sign for the people you love, please don't wait for someday. Do it today. And if you know someone who needs to hear this, share this video with them. Thank you for being here. Drop a comment, hit subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.